The political landscape across the Americas and Europe is undergoing a dramatic transformation, and at the center of much of this turbulence stands former United States President Donald Trump. From the heated presidential race in Honduras to the rising anxieties of Wall Street, from internal warnings about the future of Europe to complex negotiations over the war in Ukraine, Trump's influence is reaching across regions and institutions in ways that continue to reshape global alliances. Nowhere is this more evident than in Honduras, where presidential candidate Salvatore Nasrallah has openly accused Trump of derailing what he believed was a secure victory. Nasrallah, a three-time hopeful who identifies as center-right, claimed in an interview that Trump's unexpected and last-minute endorsement of conservative rival Nasri Asfoura immediately shifted the momentum of the race. According to Nasrallah, he had been leading comfortably until Trump intervened, labeling him a borderline communist, a characterization Nasrallah firmly rejects. "It hurt me because I was winning by a much larger margin," he insisted, while speaking from a hotel in downtown Tegucigalpa. As ballots slowly continue to be counted, official results show Nasrallah trailing Asfoura by the smallest of margins, 39.38% to 40.27%, with 87% of the vote tallied. Yet this razor-thin gap could still flip, as the Electoral Authority confirmed that about 17% of ballots contained inconsistencies requiring further review, fueling suspicion on all sides. Nasrallah also criticized Trump's decision to pardon former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez a day before the election. Hernandez had been serving a 45-year sentence in the United States for drug trafficking, one of the most consequential corruption verdicts in recent Latin American history. "I think he deserves punishment in Honduras," Nasrallah said firmly, arguing that the pardon sent a destabilizing message. Hernandez's close alliance with Washington during his years in office, especially under the National Party, forged deep U.S. influence in the country. Trump's pardon reignited accusations that U.S. geopolitical maneuvering and Trump's personal ambitions for a regional conservative bloc were interfering with Honduran democracy. The conservative bloc Trump seeks stretches, in his view, from leaders like Nayib Bukele in El Salvador to Javier Milei in Argentina, a coalition of right-wing governments aligned through ideology and strategic coordination. As the Honduran vote count dragged on, allegations of election fraud began to swirl. Nasrallah said that suspicions intensified in the early hours of Thursday when his team noticed the electoral website suddenly went dark. When the system came back online, his lead had vanished. He suspected algorithmic tampering, though admitted he had no direct proof. Fraud accusations have plagued Honduras before, especially during the controversial 2017 election, and this year's technical glitches, system maintenance, and slow vote reporting only deepened mistrust among the populace. The Organization of American States, however, has not documented evidence of manipulation. Experts suggested that incompetence and a fragmented, poorly maintained election infrastructure, not fraud, caused the delays. One analyst pointed out that Honduras's electoral system has long suffered from political infighting, limited resources, and outdated technology, leaving it vulnerable to confusion and allegations of misconduct. Trump himself escalated tensions on Monday when he publicly claimed, without evidence, that fraud might occur if the results changed. His warning that there would be hell to pay resonated across a nation already fatigued with political crisis. Meanwhile, Trump's broader foreign policy approach resurfaced through a provocative new national security strategy document released by his administration. In it, Europe is depicted as facing the risk of civilizational erasure, language unprecedented in modern U.S. strategic papers. The 33-page document asserts that mass migration, low birth rates, and the erosion of national identity threaten Europe's ability to remain a reliable ally. It questions whether certain European nations will retain strong enough economies or militaries to support U.S. interests. The report echoes Trump's speech at the United Nations, where he sharply criticized Europe's energy policies, immigration decisions, and commitment to collective defense. European leaders responded frostily. Germany's foreign minister insisted that the United States did not need to lecture European countries about how to run their societies. The strategy document goes further, accusing the European Union and other transnational organizations of undermining sovereignty and political liberty. In contrast, it praises patriotic European parties, a clear nod to right-wing populist movements across the continent. Trump's administration has fostered ties with some of these groups, including Germany's AfD, which domestic intelligence agencies classify as extreme right. The report also highlights Russia, asserting that Europe's lack of self-confidence in dealing with Moscow requires stronger U.S. intervention. The White House claims it is a core American interest to bring the war in Ukraine to an end, though critics argue the administration's preferred solutions disproportionately favor Russian demands. These concerns escalated further following a dramatic meeting in Miami between Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, and senior Ukrainian officials Rustem Umerov and Andriy Hnatov. The gathering, held near Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, occurred shortly after Witkoff and Kushner met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. No meaningful breakthroughs emerged from the talks, but leaked information posted by Russian advisor Kirill Dmitriev suggested that Trump's team presented a 27-point peace proposal that closely resembled an earlier leaked plan widely criticized as biased towards Russia. European leaders were deeply unsettled that they were excluded from the meeting. The symbolism was clear. Trump intended to manage European security issues, particularly the war in Ukraine, without Europe's participation. While these geopolitical controversies dominated headlines, Wall Street was seized by a different Trump-related concern: the possibility that Kevin Hassett, Trump's top economic advisor, may be appointed as the next Federal Reserve Chair. The U.S. Treasury quietly sought feedback from major banks and financial institutions about potential nominees. The feedback on Hassett was overwhelmingly negative. Investors fear he would aggressively cut rates to satisfy Trump's political agenda, even if inflation remains above target. Many warned that such actions could destabilize bond markets, evoking comparisons to the economic turmoil following Liz Truss's unfunded tax cut proposals in the United Kingdom in 2022. Trump has repeatedly attacked current Fed Chair Jerome Powell, calling him a real dope and complaining that Powell refused to slash rates quickly enough. These economic concerns coincide with a series of revelations about Trump's family and inner circle benefiting from federal contracts. A little-known rare earth minerals startup, Vulcan Elements, recently secured a $600 million Pentagon deal. Trump Jr. is financially connected to the company, having joined 1899 Capital, the fund that invested in Vulcan, as a partner. 4 companies in the fund's portfolio have won over $735 million in contracts under the Trump administration, raising ethical questions about conflicts of interest. Watchdog groups argue that presidents must avoid any appearance of using public office to enrich themselves or their families, though the Pentagon insists Trump Jr. played no role in negotiating the loan agreement. Even beyond this, Trump's influence remains palpable across domestic policy, military operations, alliance commitments, and global economic strategy. The Pentagon's Inspector General recently ruled that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth violated policy and endangered U.S. forces by sharing details of planned strikes against Houthi rebels in unsecured signal chats. The New York Times sued the Pentagon in response to new limits on media access. Meanwhile, Trump claimed that the U.S. affordability crisis is a hoax, dismissing concerns about high living costs despite voters listing inflation as a top priority. Beyond political and military matters, wealthy donors like Michael and Susan Dell pledged $6.25 billion to fund Trump Accounts for American Children, a program aimed at reshaping long-term financial savings structures. Latin American countries, inspired in part by Trump's push for resource independence, accelerated deals to develop regional supply chains for critical minerals. And in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer faced unexpected political complications surrounding the selection of Britain's next ambassador to Washington, another reminder of how Trump's return to power complicates international diplomacy. Taken together, these developments paint a portrait of a world once again reorganizing itself around Donald Trump, a figure whose influence now extends far beyond U.S. borders. In Honduras, his endorsement may have altered the course of a national election. In Europe, his administration's strategy documents openly question the continent's stability and future. In Ukraine, his envoys conduct negotiations that alarm both allies and adversaries. On Wall Street, his potential appointments rattle financial markets, while his family's business connections raise concerns about ethics in governance. Whether admired or feared, Trump's presence looms larger than ever over global politics. And as nations brace for shifting alliances, unpredictable diplomacy, and accelerating power struggles, one reality has become unmistakable. The Trump era, with all its upheavals, is not fading. It is expanding.